Welcome to Driven to Draw. My name is Arvind Ramakrishna, and this is our very first podcast, episode 1, Unleash the Creative Within. Now, Driven to Draw, our website, if some of you have already visited it, it's really about how to engage your right side of your brain and how to teach you to be a little bit more creative. Whether you are deciding to pick up drawing or paint pictures or starting to ideate, start to visually think about problem solving and how do you go about doing that. Now, before we even step into that or even talk about those sort of things, I want to really discuss why it's really important to be creative. So let's start off with talking about the definition of the creative. What is being the creative? And I'm using the creative as sort of like a noun. And being creative or the creative is somebody that is really curious about discovering their creative abilities and using that, the very act of drawing, ideating, sketching to solve creative problems. Being creative and developing the right side of your brain not only helps you to create in your abilities, but also helps you to effectively solve problems and think outside the box. Now let's just talk about what that means and put everything into context. What does it mean to be creative and how do you really apply it? I'm just going to briefly talk to you about some stories that I've had in the past, at least with myself and some of my own experiences. But working in the automotive industry for probably a good 16 years right now is that I've been fortunate to really learn several different disciplines. I worked in the industrial design department in the interior design studio, and now I have been working in the engineering department for the last 10 years. Now, a lot of people always think, well, why would you switch from going to a very creative background and then going into engineering? Well, there are many reasons to do that. And hopefully you'll understand that why changing the game a little bit, or at least switching it up a little bit, even if you are at work and to learn something new, can benefit the way you look at things and the way you problem solve. So when I was in the design studio, I learned a tremendous amount about creating wonderful products for automotive interiors and being able to look at solving problems in a very creative fashion. But one of the things that I struggled with as I was working in the studio was having that knowledge or the capacity to be able to understand how things were put together, or really getting into the more technical side of things. Because everything that we create, whether you're sketching or drawing, has to have some sort of value to the end user. And to have it have value to the end user, it's not just about drawing a very pretty picture, which is, by the way, not what we did at work. We were very good at looking at feasibility and looking at how things were put together. But sometimes when you're compartmentalized in a particular field or an area, you get used to performing the same job over and over again. Your brain is comfortable with that. You are comfortable with performing the same job because that is what you know, and you start to develop your skill sets in that particular area. Now, for me, one of the big things that I wanted to really understand is, well, we developed this product. All right, this is really cool. We're looking at how this is going to be put in the vehicle and how we can make this a feasible product in the end. But after releasing the surface or the development or the final development of the Class A surface, rarely did we ever go back and check, well, how did the product really end up? Well, we do see it, we do craftsmanship evaluations and that sort of thing, but we're not really involved in the nitty-gritty details of manufacturing. How is this really going to be ultimately assembled by the people who are actually building the product? And I felt that for me, I needed to get that knowledge. I wanted to really get into the nitty-gritty details of the engineering to supplement my design background so that I understood holistically how is a product being made, what are the contributors to making it a success, not just the design part, but the engineering, the manufacturing, the quality, the craftsmanship, everything under the umbrella that makes a product successful. I felt that I needed to know all those details. And I wasn't really looking at it from the perspective that, well, I'm going into engineering. I'm no longer going to be ideating or doing the certain things that I had enjoyed back when I was in industrial design studio, but I tackled it from the perspective of knowledge. How do I arm myself with more knowledge about how things work? Because I felt that by arming yourself with knowledge, you're able to get a fresh perspective or maybe fresh insights on a field that you're not really accustomed to, and how you can use those insights to further the product or to make yourself better, which is hand in hand, they work kind of together, right? Because if you make yourself better, if you make yourself more knowledgeable about a product or a process, then ultimately it makes you better and it makes you more valuable to the company and valuable to yourself, right? Now, that being said, that's really difficult to do. It's not easy to be comfortable with something and then expose yourself to discomfort, because the first outset of going into a new discipline or new different area, you start to lack a lot of confidence because you just don't know that area really well. But how do we grow as individuals? We grow by learning more things. We are a constant student of life. Even though you go to college and you study a particular discipline, you're always trying to, or you should be trying to, further your abilities, whether it's in your particular area of expertise, but trying to take the initiative and learning as much as you can about many other facets of design. So how do we do that? To do that, we have to exercise our brain. Now, our brain, as most of you know, we have our left side, the left hemisphere of our brain, and the right hemisphere of our brain. Now, the right side of our brain, it deals with the creativity portion. It keeps you in tune with your senses more. Whether you enjoy tasting, eating, vivid colors, reacting to poetry, reacting to art. As you look at something visually, it's really engaging those senses. How does the art make you feel? What kind of emotions does it bring out of you? The left side of your brain is logic. It's problem solving. It's being the scientist. It's being mathematical. It is being analytical. So everything is really centered about logic and order. That's how the brain works. So the more you exercise your brain, whether it's your left side or your right side, some people lean more toward the left side of the brain. Some people lean toward the right side of the brain. What I am really encouraging is to really have that balance. Is how do you start to leverage or to do the kinds of exercises that can develop your right side of your brain so that you can end up being more creative. That's not to say that I want you to be a professional painter, I want you to be a professional artist or anything like that. What this means is that I want you to improve, that there is value in improving yourself. And as long as there's improvement, then you know that there is an ability for yourself to improve and to learn. And as long as you can learn, that means you can progress. So it's all really about learning and developing your abilities, whether you want to be an artist or whether you are actually an engineer and you want to be more artistic. Now, that's just, there's certain other facets that also come into that, because sometimes what people do is that when they start to draw, then they segregate or they make sure that they're only dealing with the right side of their brain and they're not really able to connect the left side of the brain. So once you start to acquire a certain skill set and you're able to do something, it's now trying to figure out how are you able to connect the dots? How are you able to utilize both of them and think outside of the box? That's where things get a little bit difficult. But the outcome can be very powerful for you. It truly can. So let's just talk about why would you even want to do any of this stuff in the first place? To me, I feel that it's not okay with being just average. I think everyone should strive to be above average or be excellent, or at least be the best that you can be. There are always benefits to not living with the status quo by going above and beyond your own capabilities, because as you start to exercise and start to learn and start to challenge yourself, once you overcome those challenges, then you become a lot more confident in your abilities. And I feel that with the current situation, with how we have the globalization, that it is in everyone's best interest to be able to redefine themselves or even reinvent themselves. And to be able to reinvent yourself, you should be able to learn more. Let's put things into context a little bit. So let's just say that, let's just talk about who can even use these things, or who can use this sort of a mindset. And I would say anybody can use this mindset. It should be applied for everybody. And everybody has a specific, unique way that they can utilize it. But let's just talk about students in general. So let's just say that you're going to college. Let's say you're a design student. You're going to college. The benefits of being able to think outside the box or to be creative is that, one, you don't have as many time constraints as somebody that is graduated who is working, or somebody who has a family, they have kids and that sort of thing. So when you're in college, it's really your time to play in the sandbox, especially if you're getting your master's, or if you're getting your PhD or something like that, doing something research based where you understand your fundamentals and now you're using the fundamentals and applying it to something else, right? So if you're a student in design, as you're learning some of your fundamentals and your basics and learning how to create, learning how to draw, take the time out to actually look at products, take them apart. Try to ask questions as to, why has this thing been put together the way it has? How is this thing being put together? What kind of fasteners are they using to fasten these two parts together, and how well are they holding? What are the kind of constraints that we need to think about? Those are all part of the problem solving process. So it's just not about creating something that is aesthetically pleasing, but it's really about creating a product that's going to work, that's going to function well, and that serves a purpose and solves a problem. So you got one problem where you're trying to solve a problem for the consumer, a certain pain point for the consumer, and the other problem is, how are you now going to manufacture it? Now, back in my time, things are obviously changing, but back when I went to school, when I used to talk to designers back then, I used to get a lot of flack for saying, well, why did you do your engineering degree and your design degree? It seems kind of useless to me. And at that time, I didn't really have an answer. I felt at that time, well, I had an answer, but I just didn't have the experience to back up my claim or what I felt was important. And what I felt was important at that time is that if you're able to utilize your creativity and then be able to have a technical side of you, being able to fuse those two together can be a very powerful thing. You have more input, you have more insights, and ultimately you can have a lot more control on that end product than anybody else. And that's important. Having that kind of power is really important. Having that kind of insight is valuable. At that time, I couldn't really voice that opinion because I wasn't working in industry yet, but I knew for a fact that there's got to be a way that you can combine the two disciplines together. So when I was in college, one of the most important things that I felt I was missing, or that I felt that I should have done more, was to look at more products, take them apart, understand the section, understand what kind of snap fits that they're using. Apple's a terrific product. If you look at a lot of Apples, they have, or Apple products, they have hidden fasteners. You don't see them. So it's interesting to see, well, how did they come up with that? How were they able to arrive at a solution where they're able to create a product that is not only beautiful from the outside, but is also beautifully engineered? So there's importance to that, because the consumer market approves of it and they're receptive to it. And those are the things that are really important. So step number one is that if you're a student, take things apart. If you're artistically inclined, don't just look at drawing things. Try to understand how these parts and these pieces are going to come together. And just take into the mindset that it shouldn't just be the engineer's job to do this. Not that you have to be an engineer. No one's asking anyone to replace the professional job of an engineer. It's just to arm yourself with enough information to be dangerous, to say that, hey, I really do understand where you're coming from. We can use this knowledge and information to come up with a compromise. So those are the things that you can train yourself as you are working along in college and taking courses, taking some engineering courses if you can, if your curriculum allows it, or things that you can do on your own is to take some classes on your own. You have wonderful classes on Khan Academy. You can take your own initiative, like I said, by taking products apart and learning how they're put together. These are the things that you should be, the kind of action steps that you should be taking. Now, if you're a design professional, Some of the things that I like to do, that I've done, is to keep up with my drawing. Now, drawing and ideating, I try to integrate that. Even if though I'm an engineer right now, I still like to ideate. I still don't want to lose that skill set because I find value in that skill set. And you always hear the quote, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," and it couldn't be more true. Anytime you have something that is very visual, people are able to connect and understand the problem a lot more quickly than to have everything typed up and written out. So that's something that I always practice, and it's always of value, is to be visual. Sometimes as professionals, we forget about the joy of what it was like to even draw. After being in 5 years in the industry or 10 years in the industry, you get very used to what you're doing day in and day out. Even though you are trying to improve your skill sets, maybe you start to take on a more managerial role and that sort of thing. And we start to migrate now to the left side of the brain, and then the right side of the brain ends up laying a little bit more dormant. So there's still value in being able to sketch, draw, ideate, visual problem solving. And that's something that I encourage even for my colleagues that are in the design, is that even if you are still working with your digital tools, every once in a while, it's nice to go back and paint. Go back and start using some watercolors. Go back and start using your Prismacolor pencils and start sketching on a piece of paper, sketching on some vellum, doing a rendering or something like that every once in a while, because it really makes you feel terrific. It's incredibly relaxing to be able to create something and put it onto paper and to just enjoy that very process of ideating. There's value to that. And oftentimes my colleagues would always say, "I can't believe you do that. I mean, how are you able to spend all that time? Where are you getting the time to be able to sketch and draw at home and all this other stuff?" But at the end of the day, you can make the time. Even if you're a professional and you have family and you have kids, just the fact that I'm doing this podcast is a testament that you can use your time wisely. You can spend your time doing things that you love. Even if it's for like a half hour or an hour or something like that, or even 10 minutes. If you sit down and just start sketching for 10 minutes, there's value even for that. And I'm going to talk about that in future podcast episodes as far as what you can do if you only have 10 minutes, half hour, or that sort of thing, and how you can kind of develop the right side of your brain for that. So now what can happen as a result of doing all this stuff? Whether you are a professional, whether you're a design student or just an engineering student, what is the practical application and the benefit? And oftentimes I don't think people really know. And even for me, I didn't really realize what the benefits were going to be. I just knew that I loved it. But what happens is that as you get into the groove and you start to focus and you start to concentrate and you start to utilize these skill sets, utilize the analytical part, utilize the passionate part, the right side of your brain, what you're going to find is that sooner or later, that with all that experience, you're going to start to see things in a different way, a different perspective. And that is where the magic happens. That is where you're able to somehow connect the dots and you start to see the value. Because when you're going through that first initial learning process, most of the time your brain is occupied trying to learn that craft. And there's not much of the brain left that you can use to see, well, once I learn this, how am I going to connect it? That comes in time. Because once you start to learn and perfect, or at least to the point that you get comfortable with it, only then will you be able to have the brain power to start to now think about the analytical part and say, hey, you know what? I learned this technique. Now, what if I apply this to this? What happens if I do that? That's where things really get interesting for you. And that's where it gives you the ultimate value. We have so many examples out there with people taking initiative. Maybe you can even start your own product. We live in a fantastic time right now where we have literally no excuses to be able to go out there and do something wonderful and change the world, especially with avenues like Kickstarter that allow you to create your own product just out of an idea that you have. And most of the people who have those ideas are able to think from both sides, the right side and the left side of the brain. They're able to problem solve. They're able to understand the entire process of how a product is made, but yet they understand the importance of, one, marketing that product and being able to market a product that people want. And once you get into that stage, that's where your confidence starts to build up and you truly believe that you can accomplish anything. So to wrap up, I hope you enjoyed the show and that you got some insightful information on how to improve yourself and also the benefits of learning and developing the right side of your brain and your left side of the brain and how it'll enable you to unleash the creative within. That's a wrap on Driven to Draw. Just a couple things before you go. One, if you enjoyed this episode and found it useful, let me know your thoughts and provide me some feedback on iTunes. Just click on the link below on the show notes. I would sincerely appreciate it. It would mean so much to me. The second thing is remember that I do believe in you. You can be creative if you set your mind to it. All you need to do is just try. Just creating a sketch every single day, spending 10-15 minutes a day, you're going to see your skills grow exponentially. Take that action. Peace out. I'll see you folks next time on Driven to Draw. Have a good one.